Hello, Brian from the Nash. Brian here. Get it? It's a palindrome. I'm smart. I'm writing this part of the review before I see Tenet because Christopher Nolan is a crazy person. I want movie theaters back as much as the next guy, but Nolan is one step away from going at the front doors with a crowbar. He's really pushing for Tenet to be seen in theaters and is acting like it'll save movies or something. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the $205 million in budget he has to get back. If you're insisting this movie be shown in theaters, gunning this hard for them to open back up, you better be unshakably confident the quality of this film will draw the audience you need. So, is Tenet on the good side of Nolan, or the bad side? Whatever side you'd put a movie that reveals Christopher Nolan's a Travis Scott fan, Tenet is getting just destroyed by audiences for its empty scale and convoluted story. I think I'm warmer toward it than most people are. After months of relying on direct-to-streaming content that'd barely see the time of day otherwise, it felt nice to be back in a theater and see a movie that truly belonged there. If you're looking for a big screen experience that just drowns you in spectacle, Tenet's got you covered. Too often do I see movies that are trying to bank on being a theater experience, but all they put forth are some lame action sequences. But once in a while, you get something with the size, scope, and weight that make the theater experience irreplaceable. And this is where Nolan comes into his own. Tenet is a heavy, relentless action thriller. Nolan can take things that fundamentally you've seen before and instill in them the impact they seem like they were always meant to have before other filmmakers start abusing shortcuts. The action is genuinely incredible, and with how many parts are filmed to look like they're happening in reverse while everything else happens forwards, I don't know how they filmed this in a way that satisfied Nolan's obsession with practical effects. And then you got the plot, which is like, what? Nolan has a reputation for making movies that are difficult to wrap your head around, but I want you to take all assumptions of how much you'll be able to retain and drive them off of a cliff. This shit is indefensible, and it's all because the mechanics of time travel are so poorly explained and make no sense. Inception is not as complicated of a movie as everyone says it is, but that's because the rules are outlined, and you just have to keep up with how they use them. Tenet is cheating with its complexity because the basics of what it tries to explain don't make any sense. You can have a complicated plot, but if the audience is confused by the moment-to-moment events of the film, that's when you pass the point of no return and become blockbuster primer. Tenet's set on overwhelming the audience with its mastery of theatrical presence, but it should not have been the first thing audiences got to see again. It needed to come out in the middle of the brainless blockbusters originally slated for the summer in order for people to appreciate what makes it special. Coming out next to Top Gun Maverick or Mulan is the best possible scenario for Tenet because it promises to be a movie that actually demands something of you. But most audiences prefer to be challenged by movies on their own terms, and Tenet being the only satisfying big screen option after half a year away from that experience strips them of that option. Already in that precarious position, Tenet is subject to Nolan's single worst quality, his character writing. This movie has no character. Now, I want you to understand the gravity of that statement. I don't mean the development is bad, or they're written a little thinner than I'd like. I mean it totally, completely lacks character. The people in Tenet behave like robots programmed to get the plot from one place to another, reducible to checklists of actions they perform and the questions they can ask for exposition's sake. Entire scenes are nothing but questions and explaining, and I still have no idea what's going on! I've never seen a director so effectively get performances out of actors to have them do nothing like Nolan does. There's not a trace of humanity or authentic motivation besides the tired notion of save the world, which is so emotionally impersonal that it may as well not be there at all. All except for Elizabeth Debicki, whose pathos is so bad, Nolan should be genuinely ashamed. He still writes women like he won't get his Christmas bonus unless he hits the sweet spot between them as plot devices and actual characters. At some point, enough is enough. Nolan is a bold man, given every resource available in the filmmaking world to run wild with his lofty ambitions. I think of the hundreds, the thousands of undiscovered brilliant talents who could break into Hollywood with their dream project using just 10% of the budget and goodwill that Nolan has. We have an obligation to not let him just get away with skipping over whole entire components of storytelling because he just doesn't care. I know he's better than this. Nolan's good, but he's not good enough to just f around with his credence as a genius and the money that would make the cinematic landscape a better place. And Nolan's not just pissing away other people's dreams. His own lazy approach to character hurts Tenet too. The more I think about what he was going for, the more I realize how he shot his own film and the ideas he had in the foot. Nolan's use of time manipulation in this film creates palindromic confrontations. Characters will reverse how they perceive time in order to modify events they've already experienced, armed with the knowledge of how it turns out. The moment they invert themselves is the midpoint of their journey, and thus creates a palindrome. The central metaphor lies in how after the film you're intended to pore back over what you just saw in order to understand it, like a character would for various events in the film. The palindrome gimmick is supposed to extend to how the ending of the film itself is your halfway point in experiencing it. Now that's far-fetched, but tell me this isn't something Nolan would think of. Only problem is, intentionally sacrificing the act of watching a movie is a stupid idea. If you're not invested in the story and the characters, especially if you go this off the deep end with how tedious and incomprehensible your story is, there's no reason to make that journey back in the first place. I honestly believe there is something in here about change and time and mistakes that could work if there was any pathos behind it. I'm all for dunking on Nolan for the insulting lack of character, but the claims that Nolan himself has no grasp on what he's written are rooted in distaste for the frat boy cinephiles that worship him. The connection being made is that since Nolan has gathered an audience of pseudo-intellectual film bros, he therefore must exude the worst of their qualities as well. Which is an unfair criticism I can't say I support. But as I said, Nolan's focus on making Tenet a heavy-hitting action powerhouse is met in spades. It's empty spectacle, but the spectacle itself is substantive, if that makes any sense. Maybe it's a little bit of schadenfreude, but I enjoyed the experience of watching Nolan craft this cinematic Ouroboros swallowing itself in its own gargantuanism. Tenet is a prime example of why rating systems are stupid. It pulls so far in both directions of being good and bad that I would probably give it a 5, and yet I think it has so much more value than movies I would rate higher than it. If I had to pick, would I prefer Tenet Exist or Borat 2? Can I reasonably expect myself to say I equally value a movie like Tenet and any run-of-the-mill garbage that's not any worse because it has less things it could fuck up? I couldn't possibly live with myself for giving Tenet the same rating as Extraction. I think the best reaction to Tenet is the same one I had to I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Calculated expense of your experience is not something to be encouraged, but we're not at a point where these filmmakers have run out of talent and goodwill for me to put my foot down. So, for the first time in history, I'm giving a film 2 ratings. I'm giving Tenet both a 5 and a 7, because at the end of a positively face-melting critical equation, it deserves both. But hey, did you like this movie more than me? Less than me? Well, if you care to, please tell me. If you use the time travel mechanics from Tenet, I'll be reading your comment before you even post it. And as always, if you like not only words, but the way I arrange and then say them, please consider subscribing to me, Brian from the channel Brian. Thank you, and goodbye.